Welcome, Jet fans, to an episode of Jets Life Podcast. I am your host, Anthony, and today we are going through, and it is just me solo today. Dom was not able to make it. A little bit under the weather this evening, but I will try and give as much detail as I can on some of these prospects for the number 2 overall pick. Mainly, we'll focus on Rueben Bain a little bit since he just finished up his season in the national championship game, a game in which Miami lost to Indiana. The Heisman favorite, Heisman winner, Fernando Mendoza, wrapped up the season, a great season for Indiana, with a championship victory. But all eyes were on Rueben Bain from a Jets fan perspective. He's obviously the name out there on the field that you were considering with the number 2 overall pick, and he did not disappoint. And I'll go right into the details of this pick. We'll do another mock draft here as we wrap up the episode. And keep the thing moving along. Week to week, we're going to try and update this as much as possible. We'll try and get some opinions of others in the scouting community to join the show at some point in time, hopefully sooner rather than later, to give their insights on what the Jets can do. Today, we're focused on number 2 overall. I'll do a deeper dive into maybe alternate options should a trade back happen, and also focus on maybe some of those potential targets at pick number 16 for the New York Jets. So we'll jump right into it, and I put together a nice little presentation here. So we'll start off with, and it's on the 4th slide, let me rewind here. We'll start off with Rueben Bain, obviously finishing up his season. And he had a good season overall. When you look at his projections here, 9.5 sacks, 15.5 tackles for loss on the season. But to kind of drill into that a little bit more, he performed when it mattered most in this season. So 5 sacks in the playoffs alone, accompanied with 8 tackles for loss. So when the lights are bright, he shined on the field. So that's obviously a huge plus for this guy. What does he bring to the table? What are his strengths? What are his traits? He's probably one of the more powerful and physical edge rushers you'll find in this draft class. He wins with power. ACC Defensive Player of the Year this year. He excels in collapse in the pocket. He's violent at the point of attack. He performs week to week, and these are some of the traits that really stick out when you're watching him play on Saturdays. Where are some concerns I have for him? And there's not many, but obviously there's no such thing as a perfect prospect. But some of the things you're hearing out there as far as potential concerns with this player are because of his size, you wonder, is he more suited for an edge or an inside type of role? To me, that's not as much of a concern. Being a Jet fan, we all understand what certain players like John Franklin-Myers brought to the table. Having that position versatility isn't as much of a concern for me. You do kind of run that risk of, do you have a guy that's not suited for one position? He's kind of in between 2 different positions and he can't excel at either one. Obviously, that could be a concern. He lacks some of that prototypical length for the position. Obviously, his arms have been kind of one of the major drawing points towards the scouting report. Doesn't have the length in the arms that you would like. I don't know. I think this guy just wins with power. Maybe doesn't have that ability to kind of work around the edge that you would like to see, but watching him play in these playoffs, I, did not have much concern for the length of his arms. He performed pretty solid from what we could see. That was not meant to happen. Sorry about that. Move on to our next prospect. Arvell Reese is, in a lot of scenarios, probably the one that's targeted more as like the top non-quarterback in a lot of mock drafts. And rightfully so. He's a player that kind of similar to, how I mentioned with the position versatility of Rueben Bain. He also has some position versatility as a pass rusher or an off-ball linebacker. Again, that does come with some concerns. Is he too small for the line of scrimmage? Can he excel, as a 3-down linebacker? Some of these concerns obviously being an issue there, but he's a solid tackler. He has high athleticism and he makes plays, on any given day, and he has some elite explosiveness and pursuits of the football. A player that obviously the Jets can use at the linebacker position. I'd say that on the defense, you obviously need to attack safety. You obviously need to attack linebacker, and obviously Arvell Reese fills one of those two major needs. The Jets also do need help at the edge too, so that's where Elias players I'm going to be talking about kind of fit into that conversation. But Arvell Reese, make no doubt about it, he's definitely in that conversation for the number 2 overall pick. I'm going to move over to a couple of maybe less likely options, particularly Caleb Downs. By all accounts, he's probably one of the highest graded prospects in this draft class. If he didn't play safety and he was playing a different position, he had all the same skill set, you'd probably consider him number 1 overall, and obviously without being a quarterback, and you wouldn't even think twice about it. The problem is that he does play a position that is not considered, high value, especially at the top of the draft. He's an elite prospect, and I don't think it's a player that should be taken lightly. I think he's definitely one to consider. But the Jets have so many other holes to fill on this defense. It would take an absolute masterclass in free agency to be able to reach the draft and have the ability to draft a player like Caleb Downs at number 2 overall. I'd love to have him on our roster. The Jets have ignored safety for far too long, and to be able to attack it with somebody who could eventually be one of the top safeties in the entire league would be an absolute victory in my eyes. But again, the positional value is one that is hard to ignore, especially if you're a GM trying to make those selections. But he's a high-graded prospect. He has high football IQ. He's very good in run support for the position, and very reliable in coverage, makes plays on the football. Basically, a player without many flaws. The one flaw is obviously the position that he plays, unfortunately. But with all that being said, he's definitely being picked in the top 10. I'd be very shocked if he slipped out of there. Similar to Kyle Hamilton, I know Kyle Hamilton did slip to the teens, but I think someone will attack. I kind of eye Washington potentially being that last potential spot for him, assuming they have no other needs that they want to attack in that spot. And then I go David Bailey, a player who, again, very, very much like the first 2 I mentioned, pass rusher. He has elite sack production during his career, and he has a combination of explosiveness with technique. He's just a winning pass rusher, but some of the concerns are maybe his versatility as a run defender aren't as high as maybe some of these other prospects out there. I believe he has gotten better in run support than some may make you believe, but with all that being said, he has taken a little bit of a slip in the overall conversation compared to the other two guys I mentioned. I say he's less likely just because I think if it's a flip of a coin on Arvell Reese and Rueben Bain, I think David Bailey kind of finds himself on the outside looking in from a number 2 overall pick perspective. But again, another player that I fully expect to be picked somewhere in the top 7 of this draft. Obviously, number of options here. That's just a few of the top rated prospects that the Jets will have a choice of in this upcoming draft. And with the beauty of it is that the Jets are very weak on the defense side of the ball. We saw what this defense did this last season, and the fact that we're not getting a quarterback, that's obviously the unfortunate truth about this draft, but we're able to attack the next, get the best defensive player available for a defense that was absolutely abysmal in 2025. But that's really it I have on these prospects. Obviously, leave a comment and leave me any of your thoughts on these prospects. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to transitioning over to a live mock draft. Try and do one of these on every one of our Tuesday episodes. So bear with me while I get that fired up. And I do apologize. It was ready to roll, and then I accidentally clicked off a screen. I'm going to go 5 rounds with this, and I'm going to start sharing my screen now so everyone can see the mayhem. All right. Trying to zoom in to where it makes a little bit of sense. All right. Obviously going with the Jets, going 5 rounds. Little toggles here that make it a little bit more realistic. I did this a few times, and when I was doing this mock draft, it was having the Raiders skip on Fernando Mendoza, which we all understand that that's likely not going to be the case. And let's fire it off. Alrighty, so the Raiders do go with Fernando Mendoza, and we're in the position here to go with one of these players I just spoke about today. It's an episode that is surrounded around Rueben Bain, so I will end up going that route. Now, there are trades on the board. What I'll say is, because there are so many similar players in this spot, I find it very difficult for a team to want to trade up into that number 2 spot. The only thing I could potentially see is a team maybe that's not considered to be like picking in this range for a long time. I look at the Chiefs, Bengals, Rams, Cowboys, like this group of teams. Maybe one of them says, what's the chance of us being able to be picking in this window moving forward? Let's try and take a shot. Let's try and move up, get a prospect that we would never really be able to get in other drafts. Then that team is potentially trading out multiple years of first-round picks. So it's kind of a weird situation. Maybe if the Rams kind of found themselves in the top 8, top 7, as I was looking at some point in time, maybe that's a situation that could have happened. But I just don't see that being a logical scenario in this spot. So I do think when it's all said and done, the Jets are going to have difficulties trying to find a trade partner with that number 2 overall pick. Maybe something they can explore with a later draft pick at some point in time. But for purposes of what we're going through right now, I have the Jets going with Rueben Bain, number 2 overall, solidify, get an elite pass rusher, and see what happens there. So you get an edge rusher at 1, and then you find yourself in a situation here where the receivers are gone, Sonny Styles is gone, and that's going to be like a crazy truth about this. So Jordan Tyson goes 9 overall to the Chiefs. That is just back-to-back wide receivers with Carnell Tate, which I'm surprised the Bengals go with Carnell Tate unless they're going to trade Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. Doesn't really make much sense. But regardless, so Jets find themselves in a situation here where it almost seems like the most logical situation. You're not going to double dip at edge. Caleb Banks is an interesting name, but if I'm going Caleb Banks, I'd rather go at Cade McDonald personally. And I think that's the route to go. Now, I know it's not popular opinion here, obviously, going defensive line 16 overall. But when you look at this board, I don't know that there's many other names. Trades are possible. I'm trying to avoid trading it at this point in time, but a trade would make sense here. And I do think a trade is possible when the actual draft happens at this spot. I think getting more assets is something that Jets should highly consider. But for purposes of this mock draft, we're sticking pat, and we're going with a player I think we can't go wrong with. I do like Denzel Boston. Again, I think in the scenario of trading back a little bit and getting him makes a little more sense. Maybe the same could be said about Cade McDonald, but for what the Jets need, bolster up that defensive line and get Cade McDonald into the building. Now we find ourselves a little deeper in the draft. 33. Couple of options that Jets can go here. Safety obviously being a big position of need for this team. We've already addressed edge. Ty Simpson being out there. Here's my honest opinion with the whole Ty, as far as it goes with Ty Simpson. I personally do not want the Jets drafting a quarterback this draft. Even with a second round pick, maybe third, fourth round. If you get, well, they don't have a third rounder, but maybe if you get to the fourth round and there's a quarterback there, go for him. But in this spot, I think what makes a lot of sense is getting a wide receiver with some raw talent. I'm going with Chris Bell in this spot. Jets need as many receivers as we can get our hands on. Ty Simpson is still on the board. I doubt he's here on day two. Personally, I think his lowest spot in the draft actually is with the Steelers. But in a situation like this where he just keeps falling, I find it very difficult to believe this regime is going to just pass on a quarterback in this draft, especially if Ty Simpson finds himself at 44. He would be the pick there. Probably would be the pick even at 33, if I'm being totally honest. Basically, this board is forcing me to pick him, so I'm going to listen to what the board says and go with Ty Simpson at 44 overall. Don't really want the Jets to do that. I'd like for them to just do what's best for the organization and look towards the future and go get a guy in 2027. But obviously, we all understand the state of this regime. They don't have much going their way, so they kind of have they're almost forced at that point to pick someone. And here we go deep into the draft, pick 103. Here's a spot where I think you can really address running back. I'm not overly familiar with the Kentucky running back, I got to be honest with you, but a player that's really caught my eye a lot over his time at Penn State, Nicholas Singleton, especially with the Jets' need for running back. Whether or not they sign Breece Hall, I'd like for them to bring another running back into this room. So I am going to go with Singleton in the fourth round at pick number 104 overall. And now we slide. Do we have no fifth round pick? I have two picks coming up here. Okay. And now we kind of find ourselves pretty deep in this draft. Diego Pavia is not one that interests me. Jets do need help at safety, and I do like Bud Clark a lot. That's actually a route I'm going to go Bud Clark. They got to walk away with safety at some point. I expect them to be heavy on safety and free agency, but here we are there. And then I'm not overly familiar with these tight ends. But out of the players here, one that kind of interests me the most is Jermaine Matthews out of Ohio State. Can't really go wrong with Ohio State players, so I'm going to go with him here late in the draft on our last pick at number 178. See how we get graded here. Get an A-. They don't like me picking K. McDonald over Caleb Banks. That's personal preference. I think K. McDonald is an absolute animal for Ohio State. I like Caleb Banks too. I think he finds himself more in the 20s range. But the argument can be made for Cade McDonald in that same conversation. But I do think when it actually gets there, McDonald probably finds himself closer to the mid to late teens, and maybe Banks is that next tier of defensive linemen. That's all I got here. Let me know how you think I did. Leave a comment. Leave a message on how you believe that this mock draft went. Let me remove this. Stop screen share. If you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. It's how I'm going to help me grow. And if you haven't already, just again, follow me on Twitter at the Jets Life Podcast. And for anybody who's in the comments, again, leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Let me know how you think I did here. And most importantly, let's go Jets.